talking about epithelium. So, epithelium is basically just a thin layer of cells, and they line almost about everything in the body. And we're going to be talking about the classifications in both their structure and their function. So, epithelium comes from all three layers of the trilaminar disc from embryo, and the cells of the epithelium, are really close, so there's no extracellular matrix between them. You also have cell adhesions, so you've got zona occludens, zona adherens, and macula. So the three junctions basically. You also have adherens. You can have desmosomes, hemidesmosomes, focal contacts, gap junctions, and the basal membrane is very important. That's found under the epithelium. It serves many functions, but we'll get into that later. Classification according to structure. First of all, we're going to start with shape. There's three types of shapes you can have for your epithelium. You can have either squamous, which are these sort of flat like cells, and this on the right is just like an example of a cross section of squamous epithelium, but it's just like really thin flat cells. You can also have cuboidal, which from the name is just cube shaped, and there's also columnar, which is from just columns. Then after that, we can talk about the layers. So we have, first of all, we can talk about the shape of the epithelium, so squamous, cuboidal, and columnar, and we can also talk about the layers. So we can have either simple, which is basically this here, it's just one layer of cells, nothing more than that. There's also stratified. Now, stratified is when there's more than two layers, two or more layers. And now, after stratified, so if we have stratified epithelium, if let's say the top layer is columnar, then the epithelium would be called stratified columnar. So it doesn't matter what's at the bottom, it's just the top layer has to be columnar and more than one layer, and then we can call it stratified columnar epithelium. There's also pseudostratified epithelium, and this is kind of like more layers, but all the cells reach the basal lamina, so the bottom here, but not all the cells will reach the top. So like we have this cell here not reaching the top, we have this cell here not reaching the top, but they're all reaching the bottom layer. So that's pseudostratified. And we also have some special types of epithelium. We have trabecular epithelium, which is just cords and plates. You can find these in the liver, the endocrine glands. And there's also reticular epithelium, which is just 3D network of reticular fibers. So you can have on the stroma of the thymus, for example. And there's also transitional epithelium, but that's not found everywhere. It's found mainly in the urinary pathways, in the urinary tracts. And yeah. And now we're going to talk about the function. Now, epithelium can be divided into 8 functions. So protection, secretion, absorption, transportation, sensation, myoepithelial, germinal, and respiratory. Now, to get out of the way, we have protection. Protective epithelium is just, for example, the skin. The function is just from the name. So as a physical barrier, for example, as a skin. There's also secretory, which lines the glands, for example. And there's also absorptive epithelium. Absorptive epithelium is usually simple cuboidal or simple columnar. And at the top, you'd have a brush border or microvilli. So the microvilli act to increase surface area so that you can absorb more in a way. Now, these stain with alkaline phosphatase, and they have pinocytotic activity, which is basically cell drinking. So it's absorptive, so you can absorb water, for example, in the proximal tubules of the kidney or the intestine, and they have occluding and anchoring junctions at the top, the apical portion. There's also ion transporting epithelium. This has occluding junctions, and the basal membrane has infolding, so it's sort of like this shape. So this increases surface area, so you can transport more. And you have mitochondria here as well inside the striations. And sodium pumps as well, so like Na plus K pumps to transport ions across. You can find these in the kidneys, you can find them in the intestines, you can find them in the striated ducts, for example. And sensory epithelium. Sensory epithelium consists of two cells, usually the sensory cells and then the supporting cells. So the sensory cells are the ones that take, for example, stimuli from outside and they turn it into electricity basically. And that allows you to sense basically. You can have, for example, photoreceptors in the rods and cones in the retina. So these are for vision, for example. There's chemoreceptors. These can be from smelling, olfactory cells in the nasal cavity, maybe taste cells in the tongue. And mechanoreceptors, these can be like the ones in the ear, the hair cells in the ear to hear, and also the vestibular system, so like balance as well, and like taste cells in the tongue as well. Some of them can have mechanoreceptors. Now, these can be classified into two types of sensory cells. There's primary and secondary sensory cells. Now, the primary ones are the ones with modified neurons, and there's the ones that have an axon. The secondary ones have no axon. So, examples of primary are rods and cones and olfactory cells. So, the eyes and the nose, for example. The ones that are secondary, so they have no axon, are just the hair and the taste cells. And sensory organs, taste buds, eye, olfactory epithelium, cortical organ, that's for balance. And yeah, myoepithelium, this surrounds like epithelial cells, and they have uh there's epithelial cells that surround like glands, for example, like the salivary glands, the sweat glands, mammary gland. These have actin and myosin filaments. Now these ones will contract, and that helps to push out kind of like the secretions, so they help empty out the gland. Germinal epithelium, this like provides an environment for like male gamete production. This is found only in the testes. You can find them, and they just like allow for the environment to make male gametes, like male sperm cells. And they're supported by Sertoli cells, which are also in the testes. And then respiratory. Respiratory is simply the one that lines the respiratory ways, and it's usually pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium. It's very important. And that's it. Thank you.